can I pass values into my constructor when I'm setting up my dependency injection system? So we've already kind of answered this question, but there's more to it. So if you watched the previous video, don't check it out on me here. Because yes, to start with, we have demoed how we can do something like this, where we pass in the value of 25 to our constructor. So we set up the process demo with this another number integer, and we saw how to pass in a different value to it. And yes, that works in the startup class. But there's another type of, or another flavor of this question that is, yes, but I want to set up my class at runtime. I want to set my class halfway through my application where I say, okay, now I need that class and I need to construct it with these values. And the answer to that one is, I'm going to say no. It is possible, okay? So I'm going to say no because it's not a great solution to try and do that. But it is technically possible. And the way you most often would do this is that instead of putting your actual class here, what you do instead is you set up a factory. You'll see this in the HTTP client, where it's actually a HTTP client factory, and that handles the actual instantiation of HTTP clients. And so you put the factory in dependency injection, not necessarily the specific clients. So there's a possibility of something like that where you create your own factory for setting up certain classes. But that starts to get into this idea of not fully using your dependency injection system, because now you're really instantiating classes in two different spots. And so the question comes back to, well, yeah, but I need this value to be passed in at runtime. I can't have it passed in at startup. I need to have it passed in when I create this class. And if that's really the case, then what I would suggest, if you can't get around it, is I would actually create a setup process or something in this class where that once you get the instance, you then pass in the values you need. That way you can say, is this class set up, and check to make sure that not only is it instantiated, but also does it have those initial values passed in. Maybe a second method call, not just the constructor. That's one way of getting around it. If you really feel like that's just ugly, then you look at the factory pattern. But if you do that, that's kind of ugly too. And really what it comes down to is you've got an ugly setup, okay? No matter how you get around it, it's not going to be perfect. But I also want to challenge you to think through the possibility that maybe there's another way. Often when people say, I have to have this value passed in at instantiation, there's other ways of getting around it or of doing it differently. So don't get so locked into, I have to do this, that you don't take a step back and say, is there a better way or a different way of doing this same task that would better fit into the system? Don't try and conform everything to your idea. Try and see if your idea can somewhat conform to the system. So there's a little bit of give and take there. That's not bad. It's a good thing. If you think about things only in one way, then you really limit yourself. So if you open up your mind to other options and other ways of attempting the same thing, you may find that there's other solutions out there that are maybe more elegant. Okay, so at design time, absolutely. You can pass in values doing something like this. So I can even pull in values, say, from the configuration, where we pass in configuration values here. Let's say the base web address for an API, or maybe a counter or something like that comes from your configuration file, appsettings.json. So you can even pull in that kind of stuff. But if you want to go beyond that and do something at runtime, that gets a little more tricky. And I would just say, in general, try to avoid it. Okay? So that is the answer to, can I pass values in my dependency injection system besides just class instances? And the answer is yes and no.